Like back, in the early days when it was espresso only, it was very easy. Like, I think it's great that we're drinking filter coffee. I think it's a great aspect,
Mm,
Um, but I think it needs, like, I don't know how anyone can afford the 150K on the bench, banging out
yeah.
lattes or whatever at a price point that is in Melbourne cafes. I think it's going to be difficult for a business structure to be able to do that without money being injected from elsewhere, not within the coffee industry. So to me, I think it's important to really look at being strong in regards to what you're producing, making it delicious, and really understanding that you can do it with a controlled environment on machinery.
If the content we bring you on the podcast has helped you with your business or your career and you're looking for a way to financially support the independent production of this podcast, you can do that for as little as a few dollars a month by backing us on Patreon or becoming a paid subscriber on our YouTube channel. Another way to support us and continue your learning is to purchase one of our on-demand workshops available on our website, mapitforward.coffee/workshops. Check the show notes for links, and as always, thanks for the support. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 2 of a 5-part series with the esteemed Mark Dundon from Seven Seeds and brand new cafe, Suburbia. In this series, we're talking about the difference between opening a cafe pre and post 2020. And in this particular episode, we're going to explore that specific subject with regards to Suburbia. So, Mark, tell us about what Suburbia is and how it fits into the Seven Seeds family. Let's start the conversation there.
Yeah, well, Suburbia sort of fits in, I suppose, to be more self-sufficient. Like during COVID, there were issues just with supply, and we can understand that, bakeries just want to supply retail, if they're selling out of stuff, but it's difficult if you sort of rely on that. So that sort of shocked us a little bit. So for us, it was sort of reactionary in regards to being able to be self-sufficient, to really be able to supply our cafes with baked goods, pastries, and those sort of things. I think also for us, it was just a problem, looking at a sit-down avocado on toast, the $28 is starting to get a little further away from what, the daily, cafe ritual can cope with. People couldn't afford to spend that much. So we really wanted to look at tailoring product that, met a price point with what was happening in the future. For us, it's close to our roastery. We want to really incorporate, retail coffee, like, the home market. And coffee's grown so much during COVID. And for us, we also wanted to have a space there that we could actually really demonstrate and do some aspects for that sort of market. So it's a little bit more sort of a grab and go place, realistically. Bit of a format. It's a big space. It's 400 square meters, so it's a fairly big back of house, a lot of moving parts, and it is a big project for us. Great to do it, been really enjoyable. Bridget and I looked across the floor when we were on the floor working and was like, hey, this is what we should be doing. Like, we don't need to be working on that other crap. This is where it's at. We really enjoyed ourselves getting back out, And it was really healthy just talking to people and doing all that sort of stuff. We really appreciated the opportunity to get back into the trenches a little bit. So, yeah.
Emptying the knockbox, wiping down the benches.
on the dishes, it's quite nice just being in there, just like, having a bit of time at the sink next to the dishwasher. No problem with that at all.
Yeah, repetitive tasks. I definitely miss those.
Well, it's
What were you going to say?
Well, no, like, for us, it's, I suppose looking at it, like, it's really important to have a coffee format, but we're quite selective in regards to really looking at what we were going to, like, we still have a similar format, but like, I see machinery at the moment as a bit of a fetish. Like, I walk into some cafes and there's 150K sitting on the bench. So I wanted to not strip it down, but just get back to basics a little bit, with what, I think a cafe environment should be. Like, I think it's great to go to some theatre. A lot of cafes can be theatre and things like that, but this space is a little more sort of grab and go, time based, and that sort of stuff. So that was another aspect as well.
Is that a part of also future proofing, or I guess giving a new business in 2025 the best chance at surviving?
I don't know. Like, I think there's definitely a market where people will request to have that equipment on a bench to make, that statement. Um, like looking at machinery costs and those sort of aspects now, like machinery is expensive, very expensive, and there's a
Mm.
lot more stuff, a lot more moving parts. So for instance, like, in this day and age, you know, you have a three group, espresso machine, perhaps an Uber milk, you're dealing with 5 different types of milk or 4 different types of milk, delivery systems for that or storage, but you're doing filter pour over or something else, along those lines as well. Like back, in the early days when it was espresso only, it was very easy. Like, I think it's great that we're drinking filter coffee. I think it's a great aspect,
Mm.
Um, but I think it needs, like, I don't know how anyone can afford the 150K on the bench, banging out
Yeah.
lattes or whatever at a price point that is in Melbourne cafes. I think it's going to be difficult from a business structure to be able to do that without, money being injected from elsewhere, not within the coffee industry. So to me, I think it's important to really look at being strong in regards to, what you're producing, making it delicious, and really, understanding that, you can do it with a controlled environment on machinery.
How did COVID change the game with regards to the way that you have to build businesses?
Like, we're still working that out. It really screwed it up big time. Like,
Really?
yeah, I look, COVID, I think was, extremely difficult from, we have CBD cafes. So like Monday and Friday is very quiet compared to
Yep.
the rest of the week. So I think a lot of people who are in that environment, just the dynamic shifted very quickly. I think just I think people's attitudes. I think, I think there was a lot
Mm.
of change in those aspects of even staff and consumers. I think, there was a sort of entitlement a little bit that came out of COVID. Yeah, I think obviously generalizing a lot, but yeah, things have changed quite a lot, from a human resources point of view, from costs point of view. Like, costs have risen, astronomically. Obviously coffee's gone up, but I don't see that as such a big issue. Like, everything else seems to have gone up,
Mm.
as much, and the reality is that it's difficult to run a business. Yeah. Without
Mm.
knowing exactly what's happening. You have to be, totally on top of it.
Does the cost of living crisis, like you've been in the press in Australia, a lot of roasters have been in the press, and cafe owners have been in the press in Australia with this battle over the $12 or $13 coffee, and people are talking about, that's where coffee's going in Australia. How is the consumer responding to that today?
Yeah, like, the press, $12 coffees, come on. You know what I mean? Like, that's just nonsense, at this stage, I think. When you look at, price rise of, let's say, 30%, like, we weren't buying coffee at the sea market price, of course, where it was,
Right.
$1.54 or whatever. Like, you can look through what we were paying, like from, $2.80 to, $40, whatever you want to look at. But so the
Right.
price rise for us hasn't been that huge. It's been, significant, but not that big. So if our price changes 20%, that's really going to take your cost of coffee in, your cup from 67 cents to 75. So, compared to milk or, wages or those sort of things, it's not such a big aspect,
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't the question. What was it? What was the question again?
Like, I remember when I was a barista,
Yeah.
we had to have a whole plan about increasing the price 10 cents.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And now the press is talking. So that was like right now, an average coffee in Australia is going, or a latte. Let's use a latte. You're talking anything from $5.50 to $6.50, $7,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The press is talking about it going to $13. And if we look at what we were saying about like 150K on the table, like just on the bench, people are going to have to find ways to run these businesses.
Yeah.
And because it's not just coffee that's going up. It's labor, the cost of labor that's going up. It's the cost of milk. It's the cost of electricity. Energy is getting very expensive. And these things are echoed all over the world.
Yeah.
Where does this go?
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, the machinery thing, like, I don't want to throw too many people under the bus, but, like, if you look at Uber Milk or, automation coming into the industry, I don't know whether it's like,
Yeah.
it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. Like, like you blow an element on that and it's like $3,000. So there's a lot of costs coming into this equipment side of things, which no one's really talking about. Like grinders, that we're using, highly evolved, way, do all that sort of stuff, but pretty, haven't got a long lifespan. That's how it's appearing to me. So, and they're, a lot of money. So to me, I see, I think, automation is great, but I think you really need to look at, some of the costs of that as well. Like, having someone there steaming milk or whatever, is a bigger, price point than an Uber milk. But I think also just the model, the amount of products that you have on, the amount of milks, alt milks and drinks that you're doing makes for a very chaotic, environment. And I think it's good to, you just need to study and just work out what you really want to achieve. Like these things are playing in to these sort of aspects after COVID and just, with the way the market's going and these other, signature specialty sort of approaches to, other things as well. I think it's important to, to really explore the realm of all that, but I think you've got to do it with some understanding of what it's going to cost as well.
Because will the consumer go there to $13, do you think?
Yes and no. So the thing is that like if we sell, a signature beverage for $11, no one to a certain extent blinks an eyelid. Do you know what I mean?
Not at all. This is where I wanted to go.
So so like, happily drinking, the Golden Gate time for sure at $11, and it's
that
delicious.
sounds delicious, man.
Yeah, well, that's it is. It's like, it's pretty sugary. It's got honeycomb in it, like delicious. Exactly. No one has trouble with that, but you get a really great coffee. And I think it's just education or whatever. I think it's just really trying to get people to understand. Like a lot of the people who are drinking those beverages are quite young. My son's that age. He really enjoys it. But the good thing with him is he's got into coffee so much that now he understands. Like those kids are using it as a celebration. They're not drinking alcohol. They're not drinking alcohol. They're really looking
right?
And it's like I think it's great. I think, you really need to look at this. Like, we should be opening nights. We should be doing those sort of things, with these sort of things and really sort of expanding, what happens in that sort of, because just, it is it's a different, not breed, but they, they definitely tick it a little different. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, compared to now in post-COVID opening Suburbia, what's it been like with regards to staffing? Is the staffing environment the same as it used to be?
I shouldn't say this, but like I'm surprised the kids just don't go and do retail. Like hospitality is hard work,
Yeah. Well, we were saying that. I mean, we loved it. Don't get me wrong, but it's not for everybody.
No, like there's still a core group of people who really enjoy it and want it. Like I think at the moment there's a lot of flux, a lot of people changing, moving around, and I think that's couple of reasons. I think it's financial. I think a lot of people are stretched at the moment. Like, we have people, if we can't give them 5 shifts a week, they're going to look for 5 shifts a week.
Right.
So there is that aspect. And we have noticed, a little bit more of that. People are, are tight. So yeah, you need to really look after them and, give them what they want to keep them in the business. I think it's definitely more, you need to spend a lot more time on staff hiring, really looking at being on the same page in regards to what you expect from them. Like human resources has increased so much just in time frame when you're dealing with staff and things like that, just to try and get the right results. If someone's not working or not doing their job, you're losing money pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, back in the day, it was like the expectations of us were very different to what the expectations on staff are now. It fucking blows my mind, to be honest. Will people get away with in cafes these days? I would have got near on a latte thrown at my head.
We can't do that anymore.
A latte thrown at my head. I know, right?
There's a lot of things you cannot do anymore. So yeah, things have changed
completely.
Yeah, which is probably
for the better.
A good thing. Yeah, that's right.
I'm very glad about it, having been one of the only women in coffee that was trying to duck lattes being thrown at my head at the time. Yeah. But it almost feels like, and I often look at these places and I think the way that our industry was built and the margins that were built into what we had to do, now the way that cafes have to be run doesn't facilitate that business model anymore.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I think a lot of people coming into the industry now, and I don't quite know why this is a sort of business. Like, there's still people who are baristas who want to set up their own thing, but that's
right.
Pretty much a very small, proportion.
Yeah.
A lot of people came through our organisation and went off and did their own thing, which was great. But now we're seeing less and less of that. So now you're having people coming into it who are business orientated, and they probably don't quite know what specialty coffee is or what coffee is, or how it should be. And there's so many different things pulling them in regards to, the old school, hey, get a couple of umbrellas out the front, free machine, and all that sort of stuff. So, now, look, you need to, have this sort of curated format in your cafe. You need to do this, and this. So, I think people coming in aren't as educated as 10 years ago in regards to coffee. That's what I'm trying to say.
Do you think that COVID left... I don't know what about Melbourne. I do know the situation in Sydney, but did COVID see an influx of people opening cafes, or did it see the reverse? Do we have a saturated market?
The market's saturated for sure at the moment. Like, the reality with anyone that was slightly dodgy or not really doing the right, like a lot of cafes closed. But there were people, they were usually run really badly, in those sort of aspects, Like, to me, there needs to be a connection with, with hospitality. People really need to sort of enjoy it, I think, and people really need to project that out in a hospitality business. So I think realistically, and I think that's still going to continue. I think there will be a lot of cafes go out of business. I think people really aren't looking at the numbers so well. People probably aren't quite realizing, what their financial status is. There's a few stories around of people with some fairly large debts and those sort of things going on. I think in the market, you can see those sort of things happening a little bit. And it's unfortunate, but I don't know. What do you do?
Do you think that we're going to, like, when I look at COVID and what it did to hospitality, I don't know that we've finished seeing the impacts of that. I also don't know if we are entering another, like 2025 definitely is a definitive kind of transformative year for different reasons than what COVID was. But sometimes I think, is it did it catch what happened with COVID and drag it along even further?
Look, I think COVID had some really deep changes, and I think it is still, unraveling a little bit. But I think it's all sort of, snowballed. I think all those sort of aspects have snowballed in regards
Right.
to pricing, you know, where the C market has gone. I think it's also, an instability. Like, in this day and age, it's so difficult for someone who, needs to plan 5 years if they're planning coffee or doing something like that. Like, things can change in a day. Do you know what I mean? Like, all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're, there's a tariff on you of 50%. Like, why would you put coffee in the ground? So, to have sort of that
100%.
confidence with the coffee market is difficult, or any market, where there's such instability and things like that. I think, I think we just really need to look and try and improve, the way we conduct ourselves in business. I think, transparency, things like that. I would love all governments to be transparent, or, that sort of,
Word.
well, do you know what I mean? Like, hey, look, it's supposed to,
100%.
it's supposed to be working for us. I want them to wear a jacket where they've got their sponsors on, like, race car drivers, so you can see who's giving
Exactly.
you, the money. But like,
Yeah.
like to me, I think, to a certain extent, I, despair in some areas of our community and society at the moment. But I think as a business, you have a right, to sometimes actually lead, try and, give good examples. I think it's your responsibility, to pay your staff. I think it's your responsibility to pay your debts and to understand where your business is going. Sometimes, things go wrong and, it's not great, but I think it's important to have an understanding of where you're heading and what you're doing.
Yeah, nice. Which sets us up really, really well for the next episode, where we're going to talk about the challenges that roasters face today with regards to the coffee crisis, because volatility is kind of the theme of 2025. So join us for the next episode, folks. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.